Have you ever heard a story that's so local, so specific to your hometown, that it feels more like a memory than a legend? Every small town has one. A ghost story that gets passed down from generation to generation, told around campfires, or whispered in the back of a car on a dark road. Today, I'm going to share one of those with you. This is a story from my neck of the woods, a tale that has been chilling local kids for decades. It's the story of the dancer on Route 9. Our story begins on a crisp autumn night, the kind where the air smells like wood smoke and fallen leaves. It was the night of the annual homecoming dance at the old high school. Picture it. The gymnasium decorated with streamers and balloons, a live band playing slightly off-key versions of popular songs, and teenagers awkwardly slow dancing under the dim lights. It was a rite of passage, the highlight of the social calendar. Among those teenagers was a young man named Michael. Michael was a good kidder, bit shy, played on the football team but wasn't a star, got decent grades. He was just a typical high school junior. He'd spent most of the dance leaning against the bleachers with his friends, mustering up the courage to ask someone to dance. As the night wound down and the band played its final song, he decided to just head home. He hadn't brought a date, so he was driving his dad's old pickup truck, a reliable but slightly rusty Ford. He left the school just after 11, the echoes of the music still ringing in his ears. He turned onto Route 9, the main road that snaked its way out of town and through the dark, dense woods that surrounded the area. It was a lonely stretch of highway at that hour, with only the occasional farmhouse light flickering in the distance. The headlights of his truck cut a lonely path through the darkness. About 2 miles out of town, just past Miller's Creek, his headlights caught something. A figure was standing on the shoulder of the road, bathed in the glow of the high beams. As he got closer, he saw it was a girl. She was wearing a beautiful, pale blue dress, the kind you'd see at a formal dance. It looked a little old-fashioned, but elegant. Her dark hair was styled perfectly, and she stood there with a certain grace, her thumb extended almost hesitantly. Michael wasn't the kind of person to normally pick up hitchhikers, especially this late at night. His parents had warned him about it 1,000 times, but something about this situation felt different. She looked so out of place, so innocent. She was clearly coming from the same dance he had just left. What if her date had left her stranded? What if her car had broken down? He couldn't just leave her there on the side of this dark, empty road. He slowed the pickup to a stop, the gravel crunching under the tires. He rolled down the passenger window. "Hey," he said, trying to sound casual. "You need a ride? It's pretty late to be out here." The girl smiled, a faint, sad kind of smile. "That would be wonderful, thank you," she said. Her voice was soft, almost like a whisper carried on the wind. "My ride. Well, it didn't work out." "Hop in," Michael said, pushing some empty soda cans off the passenger seat. She gracefully opened the old, heavy door and slid onto the bench seat. As she settled in, a chill seemed to fill the cab of the truck, the kind that has nothing to do with the autumn air. Michael just figured it was because the door had been open. He noticed she wasn't wearing a coat, just the thin fabric of a dress. "Aren't you cold?" he asked, gesturing toward the heater controls. "I can turn up the heat." "I'm all right," she replied, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Thank you, though." Michael pulled the truck back onto the highway. An awkward silence filled the cab. He was never great at small talk, especially with pretty girls. He tried to think of something to say. "So, you were at the dance?" he asked, stating the obvious. She nodded. "Yes. It was nice." "Yeah, it was okay," Michael agreed. "I'm Michael, by the way. You can call me Elara," she said softly. "Elara? That's a beautiful name," he said, genuinely. "I don't think I've seen you around school before." A strange look crossed her face, a flicker of something he couldn't quite decipher in the dim dashboard light. "I'm not around much," she said finally. "I live a little ways out." She then gave him directions, pointing down a long, winding country road off the main highway. "It's the old farmhouse at the end of this lane, the one with the big oak tree out front." Michael knew the road she was talking about. It was old and barely maintained. He also knew the farmhouse she meant. It had been abandoned for as long as he could remember, a place kids dared each other to go near on Halloween. He figured maybe a new family had moved in recently and fixed it up. They drove in silence for a few more minutes. Michael, trying to be a gentleman, took off his Letterman jacket. It was his pride and joy, with his number stitched on the sleeve. "Here?" he said, offering it to her. "You look like you're freezing." This time, she didn't refuse. She let him drape the heavy wool jacket over his shoulders. She pulled it tight around herself and gave him another one of those small, sad smiles. "Thank you, Michael. You're very kind." Her touch, as she adjusted the jacket, was eyes. It was a deep, penetrating cold that startled him. It felt like touching a marble statue in the middle of winter. He pulled his hand back quickly, trying not to show his surprise. The logical part of his brain told him she must just be really, really cold from standing outside for so long. But another part of him, a small, primal part, felt a knot of unease tightening in his stomach. Finally, they reached the turnoff she'd pointed out. He steered the pickup onto the bumpy dirt lane. The branches of overgrown trees scraped against the sides of the truck, making a terrible screeching sound. At the end of the lane, just as she'd said, stood the old farmhouse. But it wasn't fixed up. It was just as he'd always remembered it. Dark, dilapidated, with boarded-up windows and a sagging porch. The huge oak tree in the front yard looked like a skeletal hand reaching for the moon. "This is it?" Michael asked, confused. "You live here. This is home," Alara said, her voice barely audible. Before he could ask any more questions, she opened the truck door. "Thank you again for the ride, and for the jacket. I was so cold." "Wait, what about my jacket?" he called out as she stepped out of the truck. "I'll make sure you get it back," she said, her form already melting into the shadows of the porch. And then, she was gone. She didn't open the front door. She just vanished into the darkness of the decaying house. Michael sat there for a full minute, the truck idling, his mind racing. He was spooked, seriously spooked. He thought about getting out, about knocking on that routing door and demanding his jacket back. But the fear was too strong. The place felt wrong. He slammed the truck into reverse, spun it around in the overgrown yard, and sped back down the lane as fast as the old Ford could go. He didn't slow down until he was back on the paved highway, and he didn't feel safe until the lights of his own house were in sight. The next day he couldn't get the girl or his jacket out of his mind. He felt foolish. He'd probably been the victim of some elaborate prank by the upper... Still, it was his favorite jacket. His dad had paid a lot for it. After school, determined to get it back, he drove back out to the old farmhouse. In the daylight, the place looked less menacing, but even more derelict. The porch steps were broken, the paint was peeling in long strips, and a no trespassing sign was nailed crookedly to a post. It was clearly abandoned. There was no way anyone was living there. Confused and a little angry, he decided to visit the nearest neighbor, an old farmer who lived about a quarter-mile down the road. He found the old man mending a fence. Michael explained the situation, how he'd given a girl a ride home to the old house last night, and that she still had his jacket. The farmer stopped his work and looked at Michael with weary, knowing eyes. He sighed heavily. "Son," he said, his voice raspy, "nobody's lived in that house for over 50 years. Not since the Peterson family." He then told Michael the story. About 50 years ago, a teenage girl named Alara Peterson lived in that house. She was getting ready for the homecoming dance, wearing a beautiful pale blue dress her mother had sewn for her. On the way to the dance, her date, driving too fast on that dark road, lost control of the car and crashed into the big oak tree in their front yard. Alara was killed instantly. Michael felt the blood drain from his face. "No," he whispered. "That's not possible." The old farmer's eyes were filled with pity. "You're not the first young man to give that girl a ride home from the dance," he said quietly. "Happens every few years. A kind boy, on his way home from the homecoming dance, sees her on the side of Route 9. He gives her a ride home, back to that old house." "But my jacket," Michael stammered, his mind reeling. The old man nodded slowly toward the small, overgrown cemetery behind the farmhouse, barely visible through the trees. "If you want your jacket back," he said, "that's where you'll find it." With his heart pounding in his chest, Michael walked through the tall, dead grass toward the cemetery. It was a small, forgotten family plot, with weathered headstones leaning at odd angles. And there, on a small, simple tombstone, he saw it, neatly folded and lying on top of the cold, gray stone, was his Letterman jacket. He stepped closer, his legs feeling like lead. He knelt down and read the name carved into the stone. It read, Alara Peterson, beloved daughter, 1952 to 1969. She had died on the night of her homecoming dance, 50 years ago. She had kept her promise. He got his jacket back. They say that every year, on the night of the homecoming dance, Ilara's spirit returns. She waits on the side of Route 9, forever trying to get home from the dance she never made it to, hoping for one more act of kindness from a stranger. So if you're ever driving down a dark country road late at night and you see a lonely figure, you might think twice. You never know who or what you might be picking up. Thanks for hanging out with me and listening to one of my favorite hometown legends. Does your town have a story like this? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. And if you enjoyed this spooky tale, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories from the shadows. Stay safe out there.